Welcome to the Unmet Powercast, the place to be when you get serious about making big changes and accelerating growth in your life and in your relationships. Finally create the life you've always wanted, living life on your own terms. Learn how to take your fear and turn it into powerful choices that will create sustained change. Now your host, Mary Baker.
Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own It Powercast, a place where you can come to get what you need to move yourself forward. And if you're just joining us for the first time today, I'm so glad you're here because you want to work on yourself. And you've joined a tribe of wonderful people who are doing the same. So in session 3 today, we're going to be getting down deep and a little heavy on some of the background of empowerment, where it comes from, where it is formed in your life. Now, I just want to say out of the gate, listening to this podcast is wonderful because you're here. This is time for you to really dig down deep. But I want to say, if there is trauma back there, if there's big grief work, you need to go sit with someone. You need to go sit with a therapist, with a pastor, with somebody who is professionally equipped to walk you through this. You can't do this stuff by yourself. None of us can grieve alone in a healthy way. So I just want to say that. If you have any questions about that, you can go to the show notes, and there's a place where, you can email us, and we can tell you where you can go to get some help for that. All right, so let's get down into it. So I want to dig deep today about doing the grief work about your early environments. Yes, your growing up, your childhood, your family. Because those environments helped create the template for your self-confidence. It's where you formed your core beliefs about yourself, about the world, about love, about relationships, about what's possible and what isn't. And whatever got messed up back there needs to be grieved in order to heal. And yes, you can heal. Now, this might be an episode where you might want to listen to several times, take some notes, do some journaling, share with a friend or share with someone else how you feel. And I just encourage you to do whatever you need to do to take care of yourself around that. Now, I just want to normalize the resistance to wanting to do this. Know that most people do not want to open this can, and that's okay. Resistance is normal. I'd be concerned about you if you weren't a little bit resistant. But know that here's the bottom line. Either you go back and you deal with it and you heal whatever is there that needs to be healed, or you play it out in your life. And I know that sounds harsh and a little binary, but that applies to each one of us. Whatever we don't process, we will act out in one way, shape, or form. And if we don't act it out, our body certainly will. I think we're more in tune to the mind-body connection. And I'm sure you've heard a lot about that by this point. So it's important to go back and look at how it impacted you. Remember, this was your first classroom of early experiences. When you were little, you didn't have any other frame of reference. You took what was, you took it in its gospel. Most of the time you didn't question it. And scientifically, your brain wasn't formed enough to really figure it out anyway. I mean, we don't really have abstract thought until between 11 and 13. And as I've said before, most people look back on their childhood and say, look, no one beat me or locked me in a closet. My parents loved me. They did the best they could with what they had. Of course they did. It's always going to be a mixed bag unless a psychopath raised you. And percentage-wise, most of us are not in that bucket. So there's going to be some really good things, right? And we're not here to minimize them or eradicate them or, not note them. What we want to do is fold into the batter some of the things that weren't so fabulous because they were imperfect people, and more importantly, how they impacted you. So this is not going back to bash anyone's family, but it's to understand the context. It's very important. So what am I talking about here? You're like, Mary, what do I have to grieve? Well, I'm going to be bringing up some things in this episode, and by no means is it a complete list. But my hope is that it will trigger some things in your reality that maybe you want to take a deeper look at. If nothing's coming up at all, it could mean you've already worked on it or you're just not ready. So what I mean is that we can be abandoned in different ways in childhood. I mean, you don't have to have a parent walk out on you to be abandoned emotionally. Now, being deserted by a parent via death or illness or them walking away and not being in your life is extremely acute and has the biggest impact, of course. But what if a parent had a chronic illness? There's no way they could have been there for you 100%. They had to take care of themselves. What about a parent in active addiction? There's no way they could have been present for you. And all the drama and chaos around that is a whole nother session. You could have a parent, especially single parents, right? They had to work too many hours. They were exhausted. Maybe there was more than one of you that they had to tend to. Maybe you were neglected emotionally, and this can be really subtle, like I've said before, but very powerful. Your feelings are just not acknowledged or mirrored back. Your thoughts, your needs. Lack of warmth and love, right? Because they didn't know how to really just show you encouragement and give you hugs and help you feel safe. Maybe you had what's called self-erasure, where others' needs had to come first, right? Maybe you had a sibling who was always acting out or had special needs. Maybe you had a parent who was always acting out and maybe was addicted. Or just emotionally immature and everyone had to stop and take care of their tantrum. If you had those things going on, it's highly likely you didn't get what you needed to be nurtured and to grow. Maybe you were shamed. And shame, again, we could spend months on that and not finish that topic. You can be shamed in so many subtle ways and so many overt ways. Essentially, the bottom line is you felt not good enough, and if you felt not good enough, it's highly likely you were shamed. And whether, again, you were shamed outright or just manipulatively and very covertly, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. The net effect is the same. Maybe you had controlling parents who were so fear-based, they couldn't let you be an individual. They had to, again, induce shame because they gave you the vibe like, you don't know what you're doing, and I got to do that for you. Let me tie your shoes for you. Let me make sure you know how to do that. You don't develop self-trust when people are instilling doubt in you every other day. Maybe you got invalidated, again, like we talked about before, like, that's crazy, that's not true, you'll be fine, all those statements that you heard that are the opposite of, I hear you, you're upset, you're scared, you're angry, you're sad, and I get it, and I can see why you're feeling that, and that's okay. Manipulated, guilted, right, all that stuff. And I want to talk about manipulation for a moment, and I don't have the time necessary to really devote to that, but it's a big deal. Manipulation is like carbon monoxide poisoning. You start questioning, am I crazy? Is that what I feel? That's what I was thinking. Manipulation is so crazy making because it's like a terrorist in the bushes. You can't see it. It's not right in front of you. It's not obvious, but you're feeling twisted. You should not have felt confused, angry, frustrated, whatever, growing up. Not chronically. Some people never got a whole childhood. Some people didn't get a chance to just be a kid and be silly and to make mistakes and to dream and be creative and be an individual and fall down and get hurt. And that was okay. Maybe they couldn't. Maybe you couldn't. Maybe you were so busy being a parentified child at some points in your childhood. Doesn't have to be your whole childhood. Just could be some points where you had to skip over being 5 or being 9 or being 12 because maybe you had to take care of the other kids. Or maybe you had to step in to a grown-up role because grown-ups were not able to be grown-ups. just think back and look at, was that the case at any point? What you were supposed to have gotten was the ability just to be a kid, right? And the parents took care of adult things. They took care of the bills. They took care of food and shelter. They made sure that you had boundaries and you got to school and you made your bed and you did your homework and you learned how to relate and that you had good self-esteem. That was their responsibility. You were supposed to have room to breathe, to be silly, to create, to take risks, to find out what you're good at, to not be an extension of them where they could live vicariously through you either. Because even if you got some good things out of that, is that truly you? Nathaniel Branden is a wonderful teacher about self-esteem. And he says, tying our self-esteem to the approval of significant others, aka parents, and betraying our own judgment in the process is only one of the tragic mistakes by which we can betray ourselves. But it is a common one. Growing up, we needed parental approval to survive. I swear it's biologically built in. And if, like I talked about before, if you had to give up what you really felt, what you really thought, what you really needed, what you really wanted, what you really believed, in order to keep that approval, you had to disown yourself in some way, shape, or form. You needed their approval to survive. And if you felt like you never got their approval, it definitely hammered your self-esteem. We gauge our self-esteem when we're younger in the face of others, right? The other has to be present for that, to form it. And so when I talk to people about this is when I get the most resistance, right? The great intellectual arguments. It's like, Mary, come on. That was way back then. I'm doing great now. Got a great job. I'm married, this and that. I'm fine. They're good people. I don't need to go back and dig that up. I'm fine. I've forgiven them. I'm over it. You know, when I hear that, I cringe, because you know what that's code for? You ain't worked on it. If I hear, yeah, you know, this was the reality back then, and I've done all this therapy around it, and I've done lots of healing around it, and this is what I learned from that process, this is where I am today, you know, then okay, then you worked through it. The only way out is through, people. Stepping over anything just makes it bigger and badder, and it's going to come chasing you. I think it creates a powder keg so that when you get triggered in present day, it's tapping that powder keg of those unresolved issues from way back then. You always know when you have a disproportionate emotional response to someone today, it's pushing that old button. We don't have any new buttons past the age of 18. Our old ones are being pushed. And we've got to heal them or we're going to hurt our current relationships and our self-esteem. So denial is normal. I'm sure you're probably frustrated, like, Mary, I don't want to look at this, and that's okay. You know, denial provides temporary relief. A wonderful book, and only one of many resources, and I'll put some more in the show notes, is an older book by Dr. Susan Forward, and it's called Toxic Parents. Now, some people hear that title and like, I don't want to read that. And granted, she covers the gamut, right, of really awful family situations to some that were more benign. But it's a good book because she points out things like, look, you may not realize how this behavior growing up in your home may have impacted you. Because, guys, that's the first step, to go back and evaluate. How bad was it, really? And how does that stuff impact people? And I'm not special and I'm not immune. Dr. Forward does say that temporary relief of denial is temporary, right? I agree with her because she says keeping the lid on the pressure cooker is only a recipe for disaster, right? Because the longer you leave it on, the bigger it's going to blow. And it's going to blow in an emotional crisis. And I can tell you, my witness over the years is I've seen that time and time again. People blow up, they end up in the ER, they have a stroke, they have an emotional breakdown, severe depression, panic attacks and depression, they can't go to work, they start having more physical symptoms, it's going to play out. The thing is like if we don't take charge of our life, boy, it will run us. So my point here obviously is you can step over it, but you're going to have to deal with it sooner or later, or it's going to deal with you. Now, some of the ways that we're quote-unquote dealing with it, right, with not dealing with it, is acting out. Again, if you see, you can see it in other people before you probably see it in yourself. Some real 5-year-old behavior, that's what you're seeing. You're seeing trapped stuff that was never dealt with, and it's being triggered, and people are playing it out, and it doesn't look terribly mature. Control issues. Control issues are a definite symptom of things happening in childhood. They don't come across in a vacuum in our life. The severest form, of course, is like OCD. Anxiety, panic attacks, someone who just ruminates and obsesses, gets stuck, can't pull the trigger. It's perfect or it's awful, right? Perfectionism is a big indicator. And you don't have to be absolutely perfectionistic to struggle with it. I mean, it's a continuum. Like Dr. Forward says, and I agree with her, if you struggle with perfectionism, you also probably struggle with procrastination, right? Because if you can't do it perfect, you can't pull the trigger until the 11th hour, then there's no more time to be anxious. You just have to do it. So then it can also coincide with the feeling of paralysis, feeling stuck, not being able to really move forward. Defensiveness is another big indicator of early childhood issues with self-esteem. You were probably shamed or verbally attacked or even maybe physically attacked. And you had to defend yourself. We don't have to defend ourselves if we don't have to defend ourselves. Focus on other situations, on other people, taking the victim stance, being the martyr, that's a big indicator. If you look around and over time, most of your relationships end up feeling a little unhealthy and chaotic, there you go. If you have a lot of somatic complaints, like physical and medical issues that they can't pinpoint, your body's bearing out that stress. Periods of depression, again, and you could have like dysthymia, like really functional depression, where you go to work and you cook dinner, you take care of the kids, but you're not happy and you're not really fully alive. Poor boundaries is a definite indicator of early childhood, either trauma or more benign ways of your self-esteem being harmed, or you didn't learn boundaries growing up. We're going to spend a lot of time on boundaries in future sessions because it's a huge paradigm and extremely important for self-esteem. If you don't have great boundaries, your self-esteem is suffering in some way. Another indicator is lack of self-care, self-love. You feel selfish. You feel guilty if you take time for you or buy something for yourself or say no or all of that. Maybe even some self-abuse in some ways. Maybe not taking care of yourself. Replicating the feeling of growing up that you weren't as loved or as wanted or as cherished as you should have been. Maybe they modeled self-abuse for you. They didn't take care of themselves. They worked too hard. They never rested. Your life is not where you want it to be financially, spiritually, relationally. That's a broader way of looking at it. Now again, I want to take a moment here and just acknowledge that if you look back there and there was some trauma, and maybe trauma you've never looked at before, you're going to need a safe place to slowly work through that. You need love and encouragement and people with healthy boundaries around you, people who get it, who can allow you to work on that. I also want to point out here that you may not be ready to dig down this deep if you're not feeling strong enough in other areas. Like over the years, I've watched people not even put their big toe in the deep stuff until they set boundaries in their life today. They started saying no. They started being more assertive, trusting themselves, lots of self-care, right? And then they felt empowered enough to open that door. And they were ready when they were ready. So I just want to encourage you, if you don't feel ready, maybe there's some other work you need to do in the present to get strong enough to look at this. Here's the thing, though. It's all behind one big door, right? If you want to feel more alive, more joy, more excitement, more zest for life, you're going to have to open that door, because feeling is behind that door. And we often shut it a long time ago because we don't want to feel that pain. Of course not. Who would want to feel that kind of pain, that kind of not good enough, that kind of hurt and anger and sadness and overwhelm? Most of us shut that door, and we create wonderful defense mechanisms to not have to open it. Just know it's all behind there. That's why grief work is so important. I think if one person can do anything in their personal growth process and do nothing else, it would be have the kahunas to do some grief work, because it will set you free. On the other side of it, it's the ability to truly drop into a feeling, to be real, to be vulnerable, to be creative, to be authentic. It's in the way of you really getting in touch with you. If you don't, like we've said before, get honest about what your life experience has really been, how in the world can you feel like your insides really match your outsides? Because you never validated what happened. And again, it doesn't have to be anything god-awful back there. But whatever you don't recognize and don't validate and don't say, hey, this was big for me, there's no way you can trust yourself. The other big issue is that emotional maturity, I think, depends a lot upon the ability for someone to really do grief work. And the opposite is also true. When you see people really losing it and acting out, melting down, blowing up, you can bet money there's some unresolved grief back there that is so vulnerable and probably so painful. And then once they're able to do that, you know how when someone sits in front of you and they're like, da-da-da-da, and then they finally drop in and tears come out and they're like, I'm so sorry, I'm just upset, hurt, whatever. And it's like, there's the real person, the real vulnerable truth. All right, so how do we do this, right? Remember, HOW stands for honesty, openness, and willingness. I encourage you to first do some math. Do some research, learning about what was supposed to have happened, right? Not a perfect family, just good enough. Healthy, good enough mothering, fathering, what your siblings were supposed to be for you, aunts and uncles, grandparents, what have you. I'm going to go over a little bit of it here, but again, I'm just scratching the surface. I want you to go figure it out. You were supposed to, number one, be allowed to have your voice. And what I mean by that is allowed to say what you thought, what you felt, what you needed, what you were afraid of, what you believed, how you saw yourself, what was okay, what was not okay. Your needs, for example, to feel noticed, to feel loved, to feel protected, to feel important, right? And to feel needed, like a part of the family, like you matter, like you matter. All your quirks, all your individual traits, they matter and they're necessary. That there was nothing wrong with what you felt, no matter how crazy it was at the moment. That's what you felt. Your ideas, your crazy ideas when you were little. That you were smart, that you were creative, that you had gifts that no one else had. To be honored when you had fear, real or imagined. So your need for protection, love, and security was acknowledged. When stuff went very wrong and things were very jacked up, to be reminded that, no, you were not crazy, honey. That was bad. Having been shown boundaries, modeled boundaries, taught how to have boundaries for yourself. Inside boundaries, right? Self-discipline, how to respect someone's no, and how to say no. You should have been given appropriate responsibility and bennies and consequences. In other words, choices. You should not have been allowed to become entitled and it's about you all the time. A great balance, right, between you feeling validated but also respecting reality, that there were consequences for bad behavior. So there's a sense of some things that you should have gotten, right? Again, I am scratching the surface. I really am. So I want to right now take a moment and introduce an exercise to you. If you listen to the other podcast, you'll be familiar with this. And if you're driving, of course, you're going to have to probably do this in your head, and maybe later when you have a chance to write, I encourage you to re-listen and do this work. It's really, really powerful work. The idea of sentence stem completion comes from Nathaniel Branden, and I'll have links to him in the show notes, and I will have this exercise in the show notes, guys, so you can go tap into that later when you can. All right, so if you can, I want you to grab a pen and get ready to write. Again, if you're walking or driving, just listen. Okay, see what comes up, and then do a thorough job later. Now, the first one I'm going to demonstrate, giving a sentence stem, and what is it like to really quickly complete the endings. And I don't want you to think about the endings. I want you to trust whatever comes up in the nanosecond. Just the immediate stuff. Don't question it. Just let it come. So an example would be, if I were to love myself more, ... I would say, I probably stop procrastinating so much, right? I would set boundaries in my relationships. I take a lot better care of my body. But then I would have to heal, and that's so unknown and so scary. So these are typical responses that would come up for us, answering that question. And healthy is, they're not all good, they're not all bad, right? There would be some great stuff. God, if I did that. But there's some scary stuff. And therein lies the answer of why you haven't done it yet, right? If it were easy and simple, you would have already done it. Okay, so I want you to take a deep breath right now, wherever you are, and just try to get as centered as you can. And when you give the answers to the following questions, again, just trust what first comes up, no matter how crazy it sounds, because guys, that's your truth. Even if it's truth you're not ready to look at, it's your truth. Do a few endings for each one, because again, there's multiple realities usually around each sentence stem. Okay, you ready? Here we go. Number 1. When I was little, my feelings were... When I was little, my feelings were... Number 2, if I were to really look at my childhood, I would find... If I were really to look at my childhood, I would find... Number 3, some of the messages my family gave me about me were... Some of the messages my family gave me about me were... Number 4, if I were to really look at my self-talk, even today, it would show me If I were to really look at my self-talk, even today, it would show me And number 5, if I were to really begin grieving all those unmet needs, if I were to really begin grieving all those unmet needs, okay. So think about or look over the endings of the sentences, the answers that came up for you. What did you find? More importantly, what feelings might have come up as you heard the stems or even your answers that bubbled up? Just acknowledge. You don't have to do anything with this. Just acknowledge it. It's a big deal. This work is very powerful. Like, you can take this one exercise and do it every morning this week. Take 5-10 minutes and do that, and you will start revealing some very important truth. Again, it may not be truth you're ready to tackle yet, and that's okay. It takes us a while. But acknowledging it is the first step, right? I also want to encourage you, if some difficult stuff came up and it feels overwhelming, okay. It means you might need to take it to a place where you feel safe and someone who is, again, trained to help you walk through that. So today we talked about self-concept, self-esteem, and some of the origins in childhood and the necessity to do grief work. Again, education is the first step. First, you got to figure out what's healthy, right? What's normally healthier? And what's unhealthy, and where is my stuff? Where is it on the continuum? And you probably had a little bit of both. We took a very beginning look at your own childhood, again, scratching the surface. You see how the sentence stems that you just did can help you create awareness of what's really going on the inside. Maybe where some of your resistance is to even looking at this. And I just want to continue to encourage you to find a safe place, safe people, safe environment to process your grieving with. Like Brené Brown says, people have to earn the right to hear that vulnerable origin story of yours. Not everybody gets to hear it. Guys, not everybody can handle it, especially the people who haven't gone through it or are not ready to look at their own stuff. They're not the people you want to share that with. Those people might re-traumatize you. Seek out a professional if you need to. Also, I've sat with people over the years where, if you're lucky, maybe your sibling has already done this work, or even if they haven't, maybe you're first and you pick up the phone, you call your sister and you're like, remember when? Again, she could be in any place too. She could be in denial. She could say that's crap, that didn't happen. Or she might be able to fill in some pieces, and she might be healed sharing her stuff with you. That's very powerful, again, because she was there, right? I mean, no one knows better than the people that were actually there to validate your reality. So what are some of the real benefits, right, of doing this grief work? Brené Brown in The Power of Vulnerability, which is a wonderful, wonderful audio talk of a talk that she did about vulnerability. And she talked about, the essence of resilience is your insides matching your outsides, right? And our insides can't match our outsides if we don't do this kind of work. Leaving it buried, you're always going to bump into it. It's going to be in the way. You're going to feel stronger, right? You're going to feel more glued together, more validated, more at peace. Your truth feels real and it's valid. Your anxiety is going to decrease, I promise you. You're not fighting yourself anymore. You're really getting real. And as scary as that might feel, it's necessary. It's walking through that barn on fire instead of walking around it year after year after year, thinking it's just going to extinguish itself, because it won't. I know you can do it. I know you wouldn't be listening if you didn't want to work on yourself. And so you're either ready or getting ready to be ready, and wherever you are is okay. So be kind to yourself. And pat yourself on the back, because your badass self is willing to do some difficult but incredibly liberating work. And I've never, ever, guys, seen people do this work until it was time. Until they were ready, they weren't putting out fires, and they had safe people, at least one or two safe people around them, right, to help them walk through it, that were strong enough for you to fall apart. That's important. If those pieces aren't there yet, it's not time yet. It's okay. But all the work that you do in preparation today is the footwork that will enable you tomorrow to do even deeper work. So just work on what we've talked about thus far. Just keep learning. Go back and listen to the first 2 episodes. Go do some research on early childhood, what was healthy, what was unhealthy. Talk to your siblings, whatever you need to do, right? Just figure it out. Trust yourself. You'll be guided. Do some journaling. Get quiet and breathe. And I say journaling because, even if you journal about stuff that's happening in present day, you're validating yourself. And that's preparing you to be able to go back and validate yourself as a kid, right? Because that takes courage. Everything that I mentioned today will be in the show notes. So again, please go there. Hit the downloads. Get what you need. Get the exercises. Find some time to give time to you, right? To sit and write and journal. Take the work as deep as you can. Remember to subscribe so you don't miss an episode. One of the key components of when you're doing the work is be consistent. You need the love and support and encouragement every week to keep this going. I want to thank you for being here, for showing up, and allowing me to be a part of your process. I want you to know you're not alone. I want you to be proud of yourself. Because by listening, learning, and taking small steps, you will change. You will feel more empowered. So go pay it forward. Remember, keep the focus on you and embrace your journey. See you next time.
We hope you took away some useful insights and tools you could begin using right away. If you did, please leave a positive review and share on your social media. Because could you imagine if everyone in your life really got it together? Remember, own it now so you can really own it later.